Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today and for our discussion on creating caregiver-friendly workplaces. I'm Amanda Dyer, the co-director and producer of the documentary film Unseen: How We're Failing Parent Caregivers and Why It Matters. The film explores the challenges faced by many parents who are caring for children with disabilities or complex medical needs, which is estimated to be about 16.8 million people in the United States. We are excited to have discussions like this one today to explore practical solutions to some of the challenges explored in the film. We are especially excited to have Cameron Dawson with us today. Cameron is a staff attorney with A Better Balance, a national nonprofit advocacy organization that works toward justice for workers so they can care for themselves and their loved ones without jeopardizing their economic security. If you've seen the film, you may recognize Cameron. We interviewed her on some of these topics for the documentary as well. So, Cameron, thank you so much for being here. Would you like to add anything else about yourself or A Better Balance?
Sure. And thanks, Amanda, so much for inviting me back to have this discussion and for creating such a powerful documentary to make sure that caregivers in this country are seen. And like you highlighted before, I work at A Better Balance as a senior staff attorney. And I work here in Nashville, Tennessee, but we are an organization that supports caregivers in all states of the country. So from our national office to our office in Denver and in Nashville, Tennessee, we do try to provide know your rights supports for caregivers so that they can care for their own health and their loved ones without risking their economic security. So I'll just go in a little bit today about some of the rights that workers have, but also what can employers and advocates do to work with workers so that we can advance equity in our country and create a more friendly workplace for caregivers. We've seen oftentimes that folks have to struggle between do I lose my job or do I care for my family? And that's an impossible choice that we shouldn't be forcing the people in this country to be making. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what are some policies that can be implemented in the workplace and in our policy level, both on the state and federal level, but also share some resources and some opportunities to join in this movement because we're starting to see, you know, individuals, workers, employers, and advocates work together to create a better society that has caregivers in mind, that is inclusive, and is also intentional about supporting families and workers in this space. So I'm really happy to be having this conversation and let's go ahead and get started. So as you can see, A Better Balance is a national legal advocacy organization. So we try to use the power of the law to advance justice for workers so that they can care for themselves and their loved ones without risking their paycheck or their economic security. Because what we've seen is many times caregivers are the primary breadwinner for their families. A majority of caregivers are women, but we're also seeing that women, especially women of color, are negatively affected by the lack of supportive policies in their workplace. And so our main priorities are, advancing justice for pregnant workers, when that comes to pregnancy accommodations or lactation accommodations. We also do work around caregiver discrimination, making sure that caregivers have the needs like flexible scheduling or paid family and medical leave that they need so that they can continue to stay connected to the workplace and financially support their families as they are a critical source of both physical, mental, and emotional support for their family members. So it's important, for us to advance justice for them on a policy level. I'll also talk about what we do around paid sick time and also defending local democracy. So we often see that states are actually preempted from implementing certain policies, on the local level that support families. And so working to defend local democracy so that states and localities can work together to make sure that there are healthy outcomes for individuals as well. So let me see here. Ultimately, why are we here? At some point or another, even if we are not parents ourselves, we are going to be caring for our family members or our loved ones, or we're going to require care ourselves. And so, how do we really make sure that our society supports those who are giving care, but also our loved ones who need that care? And how do we make sure that we're keeping all these things in mind when we're crafting these policies? Because, historically we have been a society that has been oppressive to those who may not be able-bodied or racist or sexist, and so it really is important for us to join together and tackle those notions in our policies and in a systemic level. So, one of the main policies that we do work on and how employers can support their employees is by providing fair and flexible work schedules. So, what that means is, providing advance notice for schedule changes, ensuring that, employees are compensated if there are last minute changes on the job. Oftentimes, we hear from our helpline that about half of low wage workers, in fact, have heard very little to no notice of their rights when it comes to their schedule. So they may receive notice on a Sunday that their schedule on Monday, they're scheduled to come into work. And so, especially if you're trying to care for a loved one who has a disability or you're trying to arrange childcare, that can be a really critical moment in time where you're forced to choose between caring for that loved one or going into work. And so, what we try to do with fair and flexible work schedules is create that healthier workforce where we can have those conversations and make sure that workers are not being penalized for addressing their scheduling needs. And it also reduces turnover. So we've seen caregivers are a majority of the workforce, and they're a critical piece of the puzzle for employers. They have been dedicated to the job. They are able to do their work effectively, but they do need that time and that flexibility in their schedule to care for themselves. And this is something that, we really believe will help reduce turnover and retain, critical employees if we are making sure that employees are getting notice of their schedule. And lastly, I'll just say it does improve worker morale and it also improves productivity. When employees know that they can communicate their needs safely and securely without being fired or harassed for their needs, they become happier. They're able to really stay at their workplace and they're proud of working there. And especially in a competitive market as today, we've seen that some workers are looking for those jobs that are going to be flexible to their needs and going to be able to provide them that support in times of crisis. So this is just one area that we've seen is really gaining state momentum, but also that employers can provide for their employees, to support caregivers. And also, we do some work with attendance policy. So many folks have seen, especially across low wage earning jobs, jobs in manufacturing industries or retail, that there might be an attendance policy that provides points for certain absences or call outs. And what we have found during a study called Misled and Misinformed was that some policies by employers were actually quite abusive and were handing out those points regardless of the reason for a worker's attendance policy issue, even if that reason was legally protected under some federal laws. They weren't allowing employees to, provide proper documentation or have those points waived if they were covered under a federal law like the Family and Medical Leave Act or the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so what we've seen is, there really is a critical need for stronger policies around abusive attendance policies and also education around what your rights are as a worker and an advocate. And so what we've tried to do at a better balance is really show, how these policies can affect morale and productivity over the long run. And they can actually increase the possibilities of having an aggravated injury if you're not able to miss work because you're sick or you're ill. So making sure that these attendance policies are not penalizing workers for their needs at home is important to overall improving the health of our society and that worker. So it's not just an individual issue, but we've seen that in the long run, these policies can really, negatively impact society as a whole. And when it comes to also our work, outside of caregivers, but also with pregnant workers, we've seen that, some policies are able to really provide accommodations for pregnant workers, but many still are not able to provide those accommodations and actually force pregnant workers onto unpaid leave too early. We've heard from some workers on our helpline that, they are 2 months or 3 months pregnant and they need a lifting restriction, but after talking with their employer, they've been forced to only take unpaid leave. And especially if they're only granted, 12 weeks of unpaid leave, that can really buy into their bonding time with their baby or their recovery time after childbirth. And so what we found is that, pregnant workers' fairness laws really make it clear that this worker has the right to request accommodations like light duty or water bottle, or lifting restriction without being forced onto unpaid leave. So that way they receive that temporary, small minor change, and they can continue to earn their paycheck and continue to earn for their families as that primary or co-breadwinner. So unfortunately, though, what we've seen is current federal law doesn't do enough to support pregnant workers. So laws like the Pregnancy Discrimination Act or the Americans with Disabilities Act, they really do create gaps in the law where many pregnant workers fall short and they're actually not receiving the fair and equal treatment that they deserve. So this also just kind of shows the map of what state pregnant workers fairness laws have passed. And as you can see, only 30 states have passed their own state version of the law. There's currently not a federal Pregnant Workers Fairness Act law in place, but it is being considered in the Senate at this time. And so with this, you can see that, many employers can abide by these state laws or even go above these laws in providing accommodations for pregnant and breastfeeding workers. So that way they can receive those minor accommodations on the job that are temporary and also have those open conversations with their employers. So that way it creates an environment where, people feel heard, they feel listened to, and they don't feel stressed about their own situation at home or fearful that they're going to lose their job because their health is implicated. And so along with these laws like flexible scheduling or pregnant workers fairness laws, we've also seen that providing paid family and medical leave does provide a positive impact on the health and safety of workers. And we have joined across the country with many advocates and workers alike who are sharing their experiences of what the lack of paid family and medical leave has done. And so what we've seen is without paid family and medical leave, workers are not able to care for their loved ones, whether they be elderly family members or their children. Especially we've heard from workers who, may have to go to the NICU because their baby has been born prematurely. And without paid family and medical leave, they are decreasing their amount of time of visits. They are often choosing to leave the workforce. And, they're not able to find financial security or community resources to support them, while they have to make that choice and while they're just trying to care for their baby. And, right now we are working with advocates, and 11 states have passed paid family and medical leave programs for their state. And this is comprehensive 12 weeks, usually to replace your income at various levels. And it does give workers the time off they need to bond with a new child or to care for a seriously ill loved one or to care for their own mental and physical health. And so when we provide supplements or benefits like paid family and medical leave, we really are showing workers in our society that we care about workers, we care about family members, and we're really trying to, provide a supportive environment for caregivers. And we're ultimately saying this is not a choice you should have to make. You can receive this pay. We value this type of care, and we want you to care for yourself. And that encourages many workers to take on, the time they need to care for themselves instead of working themselves, to the breaking point. And lastly, I'll just say, states with paid sick time is a little bit different, whereas it might be a shorter time period or PTO, paid time off, as we've often heard. But, this is time that folks can use when they are sick or they are going through a cold or a flu. And we've seen some states gain momentum in providing paid sick time for their constituents and the people living there. But it's sad to say that not every job provides PTO or even a vacation leave bank. And so again, how do we show we value care? How do we show we value those who are caring for others, in this society? We provide paid time off. We allow conversations to happen. We provide flexibility. And so we have to show that in our policies, and we have to keep caregivers in mind, as we're advocating for these different laws. And, there is more momentum around these issues. And I think it's important for both employees and employers and advocates to work together and to share their experiences to create these policies so that there's shared understanding, and we can create a better society that values, those who may not be seen in our society. And just one last thing I'll say is, paid sick time at the state and the local level, they do give, workers the time to take job protected paid leave off. So if they do need to take those hours off, they can return to their same or similar position without fearing that they're going to be replaced. And, this can look like hours or days. So if there are 7 paid sick time days, that worker can take, 1 or 2 days off without needing a particular fear of losing their job. And this also does prohibit employers from punishing workers from using that sick time. So you cannot be docked or harassed for trying to use that paid sick time. That would be considered, particularly unlawful or violating that law.
And to your point, I think that's so true to what we saw during the making of the documentary and hearing from caregivers, was that we just generally don't place a high value on care work, whether that's as your job or as an individual caring for a family member. And that's reflected when we see that we don't have policies in place that support people who are trying to both provide for their family and take care of their loved ones. So that puts people in a really difficult situation. And it would be challenging you can see from the maps that there's a real patchwork of it's totally different depending on where you live. So how do that can be very overwhelming to figure out even what are your rights, what are the policies that you have access to. So where would you direct someone to kind of figure out, or where to start trying to figure that out?
Yeah, and that's a great question, Amanda. We definitely, have a main resource that is our Worker Rights Hub. And, that is on our website, where you can go to our website at abetterbalance.org/states. And no matter where you live, you can look at the rights around caregiving for your particular state. And we try to give a rundown of the issues that you may be facing and where each law applies. But even though, like you said, there is a patchwork of laws, it can be very confusing and complex to see how these laws work. So we have a free and confidential legal helpline where you can talk with an attorney one-on-one, and we can walk you through that legal overview and provide, further support if you need that explanation. And that's at 1-833-NEED-ABB. And we do often provide legal help. We also provide referrals and resources if you do find or believe that your rights are being violated. Then we can also, see what your goals are and how you can, support those and enforce those rights. And lastly, I'll just say we have some strong partnerships across the country. And so if you have questions about the types of laws or policies that are being implemented either on the state, federal, or local level, you could join our social media, or you can sign up, at abetterbalance.org to join our newsletter and find out more updates. And we do also try to provide, avenues where employees and advocates can share their experiences and be more involved in the work, share their expertise with legislators, or have, sessions where we're talking with workers and providing those supports so that they have those community resources.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, so that web address and the phone number are really great starting points for that. Perfect. And what about, so we see that most states don't have specific laws that require these policies that require that employers have these policies that are more supportive of caregivers. But that doesn't mean employers can't voluntarily implement them, right?
Right, that's exactly right. So the great thing about federal law and even state law is that they are the floor. And so employers can go above and beyond those laws and see what really works for their company, listen to their employees, see where the problems are within their organizations, and try to come together to craft policies that are more inclusive of caregivers. So like you said, some of those maps don't have paid sick time. Some of those states don't have paid sick time laws. Only about 11 do. And so employers who are working in those states can provide a paid time off policy, so that way their workers have 7 to 10 days off for an illness or a sickness or even a mental health day. So that way we're addressing the needs of caregiver burnout and, the need to continue to prioritize your physical health over your work. Because it really should be the reverse. You should be able to care for your own health and still have your job and not risk losing it. Um,
Mhm.
but what we've seen really is that those policies, they benefit businesses in the long run. So we see increased productivity and also increased outcomes in their own profits when they're able to retain those critical employees, and they're also lessening the cost of health insurance benefits, or those benefits that they may cover on the long run, with their employees being able to take that time off and really recover from those sicknesses or illnesses by using that paid time off or that paid family and medical leave. But
Mhm.
it really does benefit businesses to join in these efforts and create a more inclusive work environment for caregivers.
Yeah, that's cool to see because I think it can be easy to think of it as like an either or type equation, but that's not the case. Everybody wins. I mean, when you can, I mean, caregivers can be some of the greatest employees. Talk about someone who's got resilience and has built skills and has determination and is motivated to have their job. But if they just need a few basic things in place to make that possible, I mean, I think that can be a huge competitive advantage for uh, workplaces, for employers, especially as we deal with, shortages and who knows, what changing in our communities all the time. So having those policies in place benefiting both workers and the company as well, it's really a win-win from that point of view.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that was the last. Oh, and I would just say, as you're trying to figure out the landscape and what can be done, in your specific organization or in your community, you're not alone. It can be a daunting task to figure out where to start, but there are resources already in place that can help give some background. And so I really do just say, it's important for all of us to join in from our different perspectives, not to work in silos, but to work together collaboratively. And, we really are just working for a more equitable future for families, because when we do care for caregivers, we're caring for everybody. So we really are setting the bar, and this is going to, have improvements for everyone. Even if they don't need the care at that moment, they may need it later down when they become older, or they may find that, especially in the pandemic, a lot of folks who were healthy before were vastly affected by the pandemic. And we saw this greater need for these types of policies in place. And so I think we shouldn't just wait on a pandemic to do that, but we should have them in place permanently, just for everyone. So, feel free to visit our website, or you can donate to organizations like A Better Balance, and organizations in your community that are doing this type of work, just to continue to move the needle forward for that family and work balance, to truly create that balance. And like I said, our mailing list on our website definitely does keep you up to date on what A Better Balance is doing. But as you continue to want to know more, feel free to ask us any questions or reach out and, find out those resources for the folks that you're caring for.
And one quick question for you. What advice would you give to if you're a caregiver watching this and you're thinking, well, my company doesn't have a lot of these policies, but they might be open to it if they understood the situation. What advice would you give a person to kind of start that conversation in their workplace?
Yeah, and I would say some employers have kind of focus groups, or there may be someone on the HR committee that you feel is trusted and can maybe, either if you don't feel comfortable giving that idea on your own, maybe joining a group of workers or sending an anonymous notice just to see what is possible. But I think, really starting with some background research, saying that you've seen this issue happen, over the past couple of months or years, and really seeing what can be done, or how, the leadership is looking into addressing those issues could be helpful. And a lot of this
Mhm.
is protected activity. And so even though have those communications or submit those ideas, you may be protected against retaliation. So, and a lot of employers are open to those ideas and are not, prone to retaliate. But if you are at one of those workplaces, that is, a protected activity. And so you might have, legal protections while you speak up as well.
Hmm. Yeah, so that could be a great time if you're at all concerned to call the helpline or talk to someone ahead of time of what best practices would be.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I'm excited to say too, we have been doing screenings of the documentary we've had different employee resource groups representatives come and say they want to show a screening to their team. We've had lots of large and small organizations and companies do screenings to specifically have these conversations about how we recognize that there's lots of caregivers on our workforce. How can we better support them? How can we make a caregiver friendly workplace? So I think we are trending that direction, and employers are seeing that there are benefits, and a lot of times it is led by an employee who brings that to their attention. So I'm excited to see more and more activity on that front, and we're glad that the documentary can have a role in that as well.
Yes, and
Yeah.
I think it's wonderful to see that there's been an increase in employees' power and also bravery of sharing their experiences and realizing that they're not alone. And a lot of employers, they want to do better. They just may not know the issues that their workforce is facing. And so I really do commend those who are taking that first step and trying to see what can be done just on behalf of themselves, but also that it doesn't happen to other employees who may be suffering in silence. And whether you choose to stay at work or you have to leave the workforce in order to care for your family, you should be able to have these choices. And, whether you re-enter the workforce or you remain in the workforce, you can go to a job that is supportive of your needs and your family. And so I
Mhm.
think that's what vision we have for every workforce is, it really shouldn't matter what zip code or what type of work that you do, but you should have those avenues available for you just in case something does go wrong. You're still covered and able to stay healthy.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. I mean, we are amazed all the time, the parents who are so brave to share especially when you don't know what the outcome's going to be, what kind of reaction you're going to get, to share your story that can be very vulnerable. And especially when you are a caregiver and probably have, a list of things to do that's a million miles long and all these extra tasks you have to deal with, but to take your time and advocate not only to help yourself, but also other caregivers in on your team and your company. I think that's really admirable. Um, and we definitely have great appreciation for all those parents that do that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I would say too, if you have questions about how to advocate or how to share your experience, we definitely work with employees on, whether it is talking to your legislator, finding out who is your legislator on the state or county level, sharing an op-ed or your opinion with an article or a newspaper. Especially now, we've seen that the more folks can share their experiences, it really does lead to policy change because it's highlighting those issues, and those legislators or leaders, community leaders, are really interested, in solving those problems. And so there are, tiny steps that you can take, no matter what your time is. Sometimes it's even sending a tweet or posting something on Instagram. No matter what your time commitment is, whatever you do is enough. And, it's really just the first step to getting involved.
Yeah, starting small and just sharing, because I think we always say in the process of making the film, people can't care about something they don't know about. And so I think it is easy. We say all the time that caregiving goes on behind the scenes. It's at home. It's often you might be trying to specifically keep your caregiving life out of the workplace because it's just too much to juggle. And so if everyone has that mentality, then we really don't bring it to the forefront. And the people making the policies don't even understand what the real need is. So I think that that's the first step, is more people being open about the challenges and kind of creating that safe space to share and say, hey, these are the things that would help us and also benefit us as a company as well. Awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on that we didn't get to?
I think we touched on everything, and I will just say that, like, we're open to continuing the conversation of this, and it really, it's time to kind of start this momentum and kind of run with it. There's only I'm hopeful that in 5 to 10 years we don't have to have another documentary, but it is important to continue the conversations for sure.
Hmm. Yeah. First step, starting with awareness, having these conversations and just leading to small changes. Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. Appreciate your time. And you want to say the website one more time?
Sure. And yep, if folks are interested in learning more, you can visit abetterbalance.org, or you can call our helpline at 1-833-NEED-ABB.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Cameron. We appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Amanda.